The next bill is House Bill 772, Poll Observer Appointments, Access and Activity. I'll be presenting the bill, and I've asked Representative John Bradford to please chair the meeting while I do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll let Representative Davis explain his bill, and then we'll go to members for any questions. There's no PCS before, it's just a straight-up bill. And so, Representative Davis, you can explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this is an elections bill dealing with the poll observer appointments, access, and activity. And an overview of the bill, it would modify the process for appointing political party observers at the polls, specify actions observers are entitled to take at each voting place, allow observers to have designated chairs to use at each voting enclosure, and modify the definition of voting enclosure to include vehicle compartments containing voters at curbside voting. I'll go through the provisions rather quickly to give you a total idea of what we're talking about here. Section 1 would amend the process for appointing political party observers. County or state political party chairs would submit a list of individuals designated as observers electronically or in writing to the County Director of Elections by 10 a.m. on the 5th day before the observer is to serve. The County Director of Elections would send the list of political party observers for each voting location and at-large observers to the Chief Judge and the Site Supervisor for that voting location before the opening of the voting place on the day of the election. It would allow the State Board to require political party observers to wear identification tags for ease of recognition by voters and election officials. It would permit an observer to electioneer at the voting place as long as it was not in the voting enclosure itself. It would authorize election observers to do any of the following. Number one, move freely around the voting enclosure and the curbside voting area and hear conversations between poll workers and voters, provided that observers are 5 feet or more from the registration and ballot tables, tabulation machines, and vehicles at curbside voting, and do not observe the voters' actual marking their ballots. Observe and record startup and shutdown procedures, including the use of photographs or videos. Inspect, count, and make an image of record of a completed authorization to vote, which some counties use that as an alternative to a poll book. At any time the polls are open, to observe the ballot boxes, emergency bin of a tabulation machine, and election machines in the voting enclosure. To follow the Chief Judge or other precinct official transporting the ballot boxes from the voting location to their final destination following the closure of the polls. Photograph or video record within the voting enclosure as long as no voters or poll workers are in the image or video recording. Make audio recordings of discussions between the observer and election officials at the voting location, and inspect, photograph, or video record the exterior of a tabulation machine at any time when no voter is using or waiting to use the tabulation machine. Also, to use electronic devices to take notes and communicate, but they can neither make any calls or receive any calls while they're inside the voting area. Provide that election observers may not interfere with the voting process by speaking with voters, viewing the ballot being marked, viewing confidential voter information, wearing or distributing any type of campaign material, or take photos or video of the voter without that person's consent. It would restrict when an election observer may be removed, including requiring an observer to be issued a verbal or written warning for the first offense, a written report to be issued by the Chief Judge or Site Supervisor, and the appointing chair given an opportunity to immediately place the removed observer. So I guess by that, it's kind of like a dog gets one bite before you know it's a vicious dog. This one, the election observer would be notified that they've done something wrong, given an opportunity to correct that. If they do anything else, then they're gone, and it can be replaced. allow observers to obtain a list of the persons who have voted that election day, and all of those ATVs I referred to earlier, no less than 3 times each day with a spacing not less than 3 hours apart. And provide that any election official who restricts or denies access to an observer is guilty of a Class A1 misdemeanor. Sections 2 and 3 would amend the definition of voting enclosure to be the area within the voting location that is used to complete the voting process, which would include any vehicle compartment containing 1 or more voters in the designated curbside voting area. And also, the bill would require that the voting enclosure contain 3 chairs for each political party's observers. Each party, that being a Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated, are allowed no more than 3 people at one time. So each one of them would have a chair for them to sit in during the time that they're there. And that is basically everything the bill has, Mr. Chairman.
Members of the committee, you've heard the explanation of the bill. We'll entertain questions or comments. Representative Harrison, you recognized for a question or comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Davis. I have a couple of questions for you and then probably a comment.
All right, we'll
So-
recognize you for a series of questions.
I appreciate that. So I appreciate your working on this bill. I did run it by my elections director just to get his comments. So some of these questions came from him and others. But specifically, the issue about, let's see, on the one that you referenced about the official, the election official who is denies access to the observer. It's on page 4, line 45 on section 2. Is there a, I think you said one bite at the apple or like one dog bite and then you're out, but is there any willful component to this in case the official unknowingly violated this observer section of the statute? Is there a component of willful or knowing violation, or is it if it just violates it, they're guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor?
Okay, let me find what you're talking about.
Page 4, it's line 45, any election official who restricts or denies observer access greater than what is allowed under this section is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. So if someone mistakenly measures the 5 feet wrong or something, is there a willful or knowing component to it, or is it just straight out violation?
This just refers to it as like a strict liability. It's a straight out violation. Of course, as you know, if there was a prosecution that was to occur, then there would have to be proven that the person did have that intent to do that.
Thank you. So follow up on page 3. This is line 32. That's C119. So the observers are allowed to observe the possession and transport of ballot boxes, et cetera. Does that mean actually following the car from the train, like following, getting put in the car, and then they can follow the car?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I believe that is to go along with the chain of custody.
That makes sense. Just wanted a clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And I had wondered this. So I remember that there were earlier versions of poll observer bills filed in the past, and one of them had to do with shifts, 4-hour shifts, and changing names and giving a list of them. But none of that is in this bill. Is that correct?
It does address some of the things that you may be questioning, and that's explained in the bill.
Thank you. Okay, and you said electioneering is allowed as long as they aren't actually in the polling place, meaning they aren't beyond the 50-foot restriction. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
accurate? And a follow-up, so are they allowed to wear, so they can't be wearing the buttons or the T-shirts or anything? They just, when they get beyond that 50 feet, they have to observe the same restrictions electioneers outside?
And especially once inside where you actually do the voting.
Okay, and I appreciate those, and I guess my comments are, well, and also another question. This originally was referred to elections, I believe, and that.
Yes, ma'am.
And so is it going to go back to elections, or is this it?
Probably not, because Vice Chairman Mills, who's the chairman of elections, is not going to be here for 2 weeks.
Okay.
That was my understanding, because
that's it.
I wondered myself why it was put in the J committee rather than going through elections first. And that's the only reason that I could surmise.
I got you. Thank you. So I think, I guess I have some comments, so beyond grilling you, sorry for that, but
No problem at
so I do feel like it seems to be a somewhat dramatic change in how poll observers are treated, and it does seem like it does need a little bit more of a vetting process before we move along with this bill. Specifically, I'm thinking of the 5 feet and the fact that 3 observers per party. So you said Dem, Republican, UFA, and then I guess Libertarian counts because Libertarian are a recognized party. So we're talking 12 observers. And we've been in voting facilities where I can't even imagine how an elections director could even accommodate that amount of people in a way that doesn't become crowded or even viewed as intimidation, because there'll be some proximity. And I know that in Greensboro, we've had issues with complaints with our Guilford County Director of voter intimidation, and I've always felt like we need to clarify our statute on what constitutes intimidation, because that some voters really feel that when they're in the polls, and I think we should be doing everything to avoid that allegation. And it does seem the logistics of it. Could an observer intervene after every single voter if they think they see mishap? And how does that affect the process? I think that's a concern. And I just wish that we could have a little bit more of a thoughtful conversation, because I think the changes that are proposed in here might be problematic on the face of it. Actually, my elections director likes a few of the clarifications that are in the bill, and it would be great if we could work through some of the other changes that are proposed. So I'm afraid I'm opposed to it, but I appreciate your working on it. Thank you for entertaining my questions.
Thank you, Representative Harrison. Representative Jones, you're recognized for a question or comment?
Question.
Okay, you're recognized for a question.
I think I may have found what I was looking for, but I take it that in section, what is this? It's on page 2, so section 1, paragraph little c. It's the wording is the State Board of Elections may require observers to wear identification tags for ease of recognition by voters and election officials. I think I read that right. My question is, why isn't that mandatory in the law rather than they may require it? Because if these guys are going to be out here looking, I like to know who the heck they are, who's an observer and who's not an observer. And so why isn't that mandatory language instead of they may require it?
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question, and I don't know the answer to that. That's the way it was presented, and it just leaves it in discretion. I don't know if it has to deal with the possibility that, I don't know.
Okay, and the reason I asked,
honest.
Mr. Davis is that because I think, obviously we're getting more political parties, and I take it these people will be there looking, and that's fine, but it'd be nice for the voter to know who they are upon sight. So they can see they got a pink vest on. Okay, those are reservists.
This goes to rules next. Anyone that wants to make an amendment to that, we could certainly address it at that time. But I wish I could give you a definitive answer, but I cannot.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Members of the committee, any other questions or comments? I do believe we might have a speaker, but I want to go to make sure the committee. Representative Cotham, you're recognized for a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'd like to hear speaker first, and then I might want to come back and have questions or comments if that's acceptable.
Okay, yeah, I'll circle back with the committee after the comments. So it looks as though we have one person signed to speak, Jane Pinsky with CCNC. Jane, welcome to J1. Just for the record, just state your name, the full organization you're with, and I'll give you two minutes to speak, okay?
Great. Thank you very much, Representative. My name is Jane Pinsky, and I am with Common Cause North Carolina. I am delighted to have the chance to speak with you today. We do have some concerns about this bill. The first concern I have to offer is largely personal. I vote at a fairly small polling place. being 6, 9, 12 observers in my polling place would make it difficult for anybody to move through the polling place, might at moments well outnumber both the election workers and the voters, and then at other times it's going to make it look like the parking lot at a UNC Duke football game. It's going to be very crowded. I have to say it reminds me a little bit of a pinball machine. We are also gravely concerned about the right of observers to move around the polling place, to listen to conversations between poll workers and voters. I have in my polling place consulted with my husband about candidates and why he or I might support them. And I not want those conversations overheard. I think it is almost like violating the secrecy of our ballots. We're also concerned that if the chief judge finds that an observer has been disruptive, how they may remove that person and ensure that they do not return to that polling place or any other polling place.
You have 15 seconds.
Okay, we are also concerned about the use of electronic devices to record video or audio within the polling place and think that it steps very much on the secrecy of each of our ballots. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Sergeant Arms, with any other speakers? That's the only one I have registered. Okay, yep, just making sure. Okay, seeing no more speakers, Representative Cotham, we're back to you. You're recognized for a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Davis for bringing this. This is my first time seeing this legislation. As you know, it's a very busy and hectic time with lots of bills moving. I do have quite a bit of concerns and questions about this legislation, and I know that it is going to go to rules next, but maybe there will be an opportunity for you and I to talk about this bill with some of my concerns. Out of respect to you and to this committee, I'll support the bill to move forward, but I do want to have a discussion because I do have some issues I really would like to discuss, but I respect your work.
Thank you, members of the committee. Any other comments or questions? Representative Davis has already said that he's willing to work with folks in rules, so appreciate you keeping that in mind as we move this thing along. Representative Harrison, you look like you're
I was just going to
you're
ask
recognized for a question or comment.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote or a recorded vote, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the chairman would.
I'll retract that. I'll retract that.
Okay, she's retracted it, so this will just be a traditional voice vote. Okay, the chairman will entertain a motion. Okay, I'm seeing Representative Potts. Give me the nod. Representative Potts, you're recognized for a motion, sir.
At this point, I'll move for a favorable report to House Bill 772 with referral to rules.
Very good, members of the committee. You've heard Representative Potts' motion for a favorable report for House Bill 772 with referral to rules. If you support the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. If you oppose, please say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill moves on to rules. I will now pass the gavel back to Chairman Davis.